Welcome to our first LinkedIn Live. I'm Simon from Fuse Fabric, and today we're tackling a big shift in retail tech, and we'll be discussing why it's time to stop developing and start adopting. For too long, retail CTOs have been stuck customizing technologies to fit their business. The reality, that approach is slowing you down. The smartest companies aren't building from scratch anymore. They're adopting scalable platforms and focusing on innovation that actually drives growth. Joining me today is Sean Perkinson, CTO from Kayani, formerly at Bowden and Burberry, as well as Doug Gardner, who's CIO at Flying Tiger Copenhagen, who have both seen this shift firsthand. In this session, we'll break down what this shift means, share real success stories, and give you practical steps to stay ahead. And of course, we want to hear from you. So please drop your comments and questions in the chat. We'll get to as many as we can. And for those that we can't get to, we'll make sure we follow up with you after the event. So let's dive in. Sean, we'll start with you. I met you a few years ago at Bowden when you were CTO for Bowden. Since then, Fuse Fabric has successfully launched Bowden onto the Shopify platform, but perhaps you can just give a brief introduction to yourself for everybody that's listening.
Yeah, sure, Simon. Thanks for having me here. So so I'm now, for the last 8 months, I've been based in Saudi in a CTO role for PIF in one of their investments, Kayani. And yeah, like you say, previous to here, I've held a number of CTO and VP technology roles in London and New York at Bowden, Tory Burch, and I started my retail career spending, I think, 6 or 7 years with Burberry.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks, Sean. And Doug, we met back in 2019. I believe it was in Tokyo in the Rugby World Cup semi-finals. Good rugby, good food, good entertainment. And I just remember shopping a lot with you in Tokyo, downtown Tokyo. It was always fun. And since then, obviously, we've maintained contact and now Fuse Fabric has been operating for Flying Tiger for the last few years from a Shopify perspective. But again, perhaps you can give a brief introduction to yourself as well.
Yeah, I've been CIO since May 2020, moved to Copenhagen from London. Prior to that, it was 9 years at River Island, a UK fashion company. Prior to that was French Connection during the exciting days of their FC UK logo. And then prior to that, I was with an American hair and beauty company called Sally Hair and Beauty. So long time in career, quite a bit of time in more the quirky fashion side of the business.
Great stuff. Thanks, Doug, and thanks again, Sean, and thank you for joining on the session today. So let's dive straight into it. The first topic we're going to kind of cover is this retail tech mindset shift, a bit of a tongue twister. I always call it out whenever I meet new prospects or people in the industry. I get quite brutal with this comment, but I'm quite a believer on it because I've seen it quite often that most retailers still think that they're unique and that technology is providing that differentiator. And I'm not a believer of that. I think that technology is no longer the differentiator, as the technology is pretty much an off-the-shelf commodity. And what differentiates brands nowadays is the products, the services, and the marketing. And for me, it's all about how you'll adopt, those proven platforms and adjust your business processes. So, with that in mind, Sean, what do you think the biggest mindset barrier to stopping retailers is for adopting these kind of proven platforms?
Yeah, I think you've touched on it. There's a couple, I think, that I see. One internally within the technology teams, that resistance from sort of high-performing engineering teams who have been building this capability for so long, making that shift or accepting that shift. I think the second is the business also feeling exactly like you say, that they are differentiating themselves and they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket on a platform. But I think, like the platforms now have caught up so much. There really isn't now, if you look across that, the e-commerce funnel, there's not really anything from a tech perspective that's differentiating anymore. So I think companies are still a little bit stuck in the sense that they still think they need to build some of this capability, when actually, do you know what, the platforms like Shopify have caught up and are easily giving them that capability now off the shelf.
And have you got first-hand experience that you're willing to share around where you kind of met that challenge in a business where, you know, they're still just not quite sure, you know, we're too special, we're too unique, we're too big, we're too something that just doesn't allow us to adopt that particular piece of technology? And it doesn't have to be the ecom platform, it could be anything, any part of the architecture, but
Yeah,
anyone that you can share.
No, I think a good example is so both Burberry, Tory Burch, and even at Bowden, you know, I had product engineering teams that focused 100% on checkout, building new payment types, changing the UX. I think at Burberry we redesigned and re-implemented checkout. I'm going to guess 3 times. We did it twice at Tory Burch, with you guys at Bowden. But I think the thing with the engineers is, and particularly high-performing engineering teams, as long as you can find them an interesting challenge, they're not too difficult to move off, you know, onto something new. I think the difficulty becomes more with, you know, the exec or even the board, who feel that, particularly back to that comment around all eggs in one basket, can this platform do everything that we are a global business? Bowden was a global business, operating in 7 global markets, 2 warehouses globally. You know, it took a lot to come around to the idea that actually there is a platform out there that can deliver all of the nuances and the complexity of that business. But you know, that's like I'd say to the board and the exec, like, okay, so I have 100 or 200 developers, whatever it is, but Shopify have 4,000. So whose innovation cycle do you want to be on? Like, do you want to be on my innovation cycle with my 100 or 200 engineers, or do you want to be on Shopify's innovation cycle roadmap with their 4,000? And just back to that comment, really honestly now, what is differentiating from a technology perspective anymore in that e-commerce funnel? You know, so I think once we got through all of those sort of conversations with the board, and you guys played a big part in getting them comfortable as well, you know, sort of unleashed the shackles and off we went. They're probably the 2 areas, yeah.
Okay, and we'll come on to the board and how we influence kind of, you know, the board later on in the conversation. But, you know, the board aside, Doug, you know, how do we get the teams to embrace off the shelf solutions? How do you convince the business that they don't need to customize everything? The board's one thing, and we'll come on to it, but how do you get everybody else within the business onto that journey that actually these platforms are capable now? They do have the functionality. We can bend our business to the platform and our business will still survive. How do you do that from within the business?
Well, I think an important point raised, especially with us, is our business is about, you know, cool, quirky products. It's not about being a software house or a bunch of software developers. And I think we've got to keep that focus, and that really helps when you start to look at how much effort you're going to put into, you know, software development or customization. I think a lot of people, including our own company, have seen the results of customization. We have an ERP system that's been customized, and it makes it difficult to move forward, difficult to maintain, difficult to adapt and change. A lot of people joining the business from others, from e-com backgrounds, have seen also where you customize things, initially feeling it's a great idea, but you get yourselves in a position where you can't move. It's very hard to upgrade, and you can't adopt because of the high cost of change in those platforms. So you have a good basis for people to understand the conversation, to say what is the result of doing it another way, and probably a lot of people can recognize that. I think also it's been interesting, the impact of the pandemic. I think a lot of companies had to learn how to run incredibly lean and be able to adapt very, very rapidly. And I think if you have highly customized solutions, it's very difficult to adapt in those lean times. And it's also very difficult to maintain and move forward if you have to radically cut costs to adapt. So it's another piece of the foundation, I think, that's helped with the argument. And I think touching on what Sean has stated, the platforms now are very robust. E-commerce is no longer a niche thing. It's developed quite a bit, and you can show people how they can achieve most of what they want, or they can solve problems multiple ways with a set of tools out of the box. So using that type of framework, it's relatively straightforward to get people to understand the negatives of doing customization. They can see the positives, and I think you can start to communicate to them about the pace. When you move up the chain into the chief executive and CFO, understanding the cost impact of running a very efficient business at a very low cost is also incredibly appealing. Our business in particular has a very low basket value, very low price point. So we have to, as a business, be efficient. So this last piece about adapting to the platform to gain efficiencies is incredibly important, because we can't afford to throw a lot of expensive bodies at it. We have to move fast. We have thousands of products. So the efficiencies you gain through not having to maintain older systems or continually grind forward is also a huge win in the argument to say this is the overall benefit, is to be able to go quicker.
Okay, so the argument is quite cross-cutting, isn't it? From these platforms have the functionality to meet the requirements. They've got the efficiencies from a business operational perspective, business process perspective. And ultimately, then that boils down to that potentially a lower cost of ownership as well. And I suppose everybody that's inputting into those decisions is responsible for different things, or wants different things out of it, and therefore will pick up on those. You pick up on the specific points that's important to them when it comes to deciding that, yes, we could take a platform, such as X, and our business will survive. So there needs to be quite a few. It's multifaceted as such, as part of that decision-making process.
Yes, I think it's again, this idea of making your business efficient, able to move quickly, cost effectively, resonates very strong within our business. So people have been able to look at that argument that says, instead of spending a lot of time going down a dark alley to customize or to try and make a platform adapt to the way we think that is correct, using some industry standards or some very modern platforms that really have some good features, you pick up a lot of efficiency that way. And I think that really resonates within the business. They can run a much more streamlined operations. You can do things quicker, turn things on faster. So I think that's, for us especially, we need to be incredibly efficient. So that overall win of that, along again with the capabilities of these platforms, really helps to convince people that this is the best way to run or implement platforms within our business.
Okay. Great.
I was just going to add to that, the business now also so much better educated. Technology now is so much more commoditized. It's so much more accessible. It's actually more of a difficult argument or debate to have with the business. Say, I need to build this, versus actually, but they know, there are platforms out there where they can just turn this capability on, like, as Doug's describing. And this is all e-com commercial teams and product teams want to do. They want to bring their features to market as fast as they can.
Yeah.
And they know, because they research the market, they know this capability is out there. And so it becomes it becomes more of a harder conversation to justify the developing it yourself than actually, why don't we just go and find something out there that can do it for us and turn it on, and then then let's go and work out how we differentiate the customer experience somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good segue into the next topic, which is the age-old debate of build versus buy, right? And I remember I was thinking about this as we're putting together the session. I mean, back when I was head of technology at ASOS.com in the 2000s, everything was build, right? Because we didn't have the option to buy. We didn't have the platforms back then, and the confidence that those platforms could meet the feature capabilities, or reduce our cost of ownership, etc., or even handle the scale of ASOS back in the days. And so it was always a case of well, we're going to build it, and maybe we'll look at buying it if possible. Fast forward, I don't want to calculate how many years, because that will make me feel too old, but calculate, moving forward to today, it's the other way around, as you say, isn't it? It's more, actually, we're going to buy it. We're going to buy it, and you have to make the argument to build it. I'm a kind of a believer that, you should build where it gives that competitive advantage, and then buy it otherwise. But if a retailer is stuck deciding between that kind of build versus adopting decision, what's the question? What's the first question they're going to ask themselves, or how do they get through that decision? What is it that's going to get them over the line, do you think, Sean?
I think so. It's equally relevant, on our system of record and ERP implementations. I think now it's in the e-commerce space, but it's in terms of the systems that you're considering, and does it have the capabilities that you require? If it does, then there's a good chance that all your competitors have this capability as well.
Yeah.
So you're not giving yourself any competitive advantage by then building it. Yeah. And actually, the challenge now, particularly in retail, is for us, retail CTOs, CIOs, is like, how do we bring the capability to market as fast as we can? I think that's sort of the first question that you need to ask. We've already touched on, I think, the other couple that are important. I think total cost of ownership. It's now like it's not just about developing that capability, but then you've got to maintain it. You've got to control the tech debt. You've got to, you're impacting your CapEx as well as your OpEx, in future years. And really, like, the expectation now, because like I said before, this capability is so commoditized. Now the expectation to go to market faster is there. We can't. There are no excuses anymore to take 6 or 9 months to implement a piece of functionality, particularly in the e-commerce space. But I think it just comes back to, what is that capability met by the system? Then, like, both on the ERP side, I think they've made huge steps in being able to support with standard functionality and just configuration all of our retail processes. It's the same in the e-commerce space.
Yeah. And Doug, what do you think about this in terms of the comment about building where there's competitive advantage? Do you believe in that? Have you got an example where you've done that, either Flying Tiger or past experience, to build in those areas and take something off the shelf in others?
Yeah, I think River Island, again, it was in a time when, like you said, Simon, when things didn't exist and you built more. But I think, again, going to this argument about why would you want to customize, I don't even think it's probably the argument's a little bit more focused. Instead of just completely building from scratch something, it's more thinking about why should we customize something. Shopify is a good example. If it doesn't do something, people might want to customize it. And I think, all those points Sean mentions, I would, I believe in strongly this whole idea. It's just not just the cost of building it, which is expensive. It's to run it and to maintain it, and getting yourselves into these corners where you customize it so much you can't advance. So it is becoming that flipped argument, which is it's very, very hard for people to justify what is so unique that you couldn't adopt it. And I think it's about again moving the argument on to there are multiple ways to solve a problem. So instead of hyper focusing on one feature that doesn't exist, looking at other capabilities to achieve the goals, whether it's conversion rates or whatever you're trying to track, basket values, anything on the site, using other features within the website to achieve it. So I think there's just a lot of tools now and a lot of approaches that make it a very difficult argument to say that it doesn't exist. We're not on a bleeding edge. Maybe like an ASOS that's always trying to do the very, very greatest thing. We are a product-based company. Ecom has developed quite a bit with these platforms. So therefore, I think the argument that says what we would need to do at this point in time within Flying Tiger would require any customization is a very, very difficult argument. Again, I want to stress there are multiple ways to solve problems, and sometimes 85% of a solution to a problem that you can turn something on instantly is better than 95% of a solution that would take 9 months to deploy. So there's a lot of elements that help this argument, and I think it's putting the individuals that would want to argue for complete customization in a very difficult position. There's a lot at our disposal to argue the other side of it.
Yeah, and we come across that conversation actually quite often now in what we do at Fuse Fabric. That exactly that. Would you rather have 85%, 90% sooner, or would you have the 100% and it's going to come later? But you can't always validate that extra 5-10% is really going to drive the value, the cost and all the complexity is going to bring with it as well. And I think that conversation is getting easier as well. People are understanding that and saying, you know what, that's okay. I'll take the 85%. I'll come back to that last 10 to 15. Invariably they don't, because they thought they did, but actually they don't really need to. You just, it was on the nice to have list, So I think that conversation is a lot easier nowadays as well.
But you can also, the good thing is you can turn those things. They're so cheap to turn on. The other thing is there's very little investment in a lot of these things if they don't go necessarily according to plan. And again, this idea of it's maybe an individual feature not being perfect. We've got great examples of that. But also, if I look back to our implementation, I mean, there was a big push to customize and hyper focus on one market and get it absolutely right and build things that Shopify didn't do, versus what we pushed was we're in 27 different countries. We can go live in all 27 countries in a very short space of time in English and in euros to begin with, but we can learn a lot really fast and get a massive audience of Europe. And so it was one of those great examples where there was a lot of push to say, no, we need to hyper customize and do things Shopify can't do and get one country perfect, where we decided to take the go all across Europe. We were able with Shopify to turn it on really, really quickly and manage it, and then find out what countries were really engaging with the platform, and then start to turn on features in that space. And the other one that's a great, this 85% example was my favorite one, was the language. I mean, there was so much debate on, right, we went live with only English across 27 countries. There's all these languages. There was a massive debate brewing about how we were going to solve that problem, and it had to be perfect and all these nuances. We just in the background at the time with the team, and decided just to turn on all countries' languages at once using a relatively simple tool that plugged in. So created a little bit of noise. Some people didn't like it. I mean, there was a few little edge cases where it did some really strange translations. It was a perfect example where we just all of a sudden hit, every localized language literally almost overnight, and then we learned what didn't really work, and we adapted it after. But that was a good example of a mindset that got bogged into, we have to do it perfect, and there's so many reasons why we can't do this, that, and the other, that we just turned it on and learned very rapidly. And the net result was amazing on how positive it was in terms of the impact on the website. And that was literally, I think it just took us 24, 48 hours to plumb it in and turn it on. So it's a great example of, if you looked at that in isolation, you'd say, wouldn't really want to do that. We want to think of 1,000 reasons why we couldn't. While we were having that debate, we turned it on and learned and adapted and fixed the things that didn't. But we used that approach, and it was one of, I think, the biggest wins with inside the organization, where people went and said, okay, you're right, that wasn't that bad. Let's maybe try that again.
Yeah,
I can give a similar example of, Simon, with you guys, we've just designed and implemented Shopify. We've done it in 4 months. I think actually it was probably about 3.5 months from start to finish to go live. But in addition, we also implemented Klaviyo, an automated marketing tool that we just plugged in, and the performance marketing team are operational within a matter of minutes. If you think back 5-10 years and you're thinking about integrating an automated marketing tool, this is sort of months at a time. No, this was literally minutes. I didn't even know the team did it. It's like the product owner turned it on, then the marketing team are already running a campaign within an hour. Same with customer service. And I think that's probably one of the other things, just from an enterprise perspective, where companies are grappling with the idea of Shopify. Is it enterprise ready? It's like, this is a great example of, where the ecosystem is maturing really quickly in the marketplace, and plugging things in and moving this is music to my ears. So I know that Klaviyo probably isn't going to do everything that we need it to do.
Yeah.
And exactly to Doug's point, which is like, I would much rather they adopt 100% of that then they come into the marketing team, come and say, I need this tool that's going to cost $500,000 and it's going to take 8 months to implement and cost another $1 million to implement as well. And actually we do that, and then I look at it and I see they've only adopted 20% of its capability. I would much rather plug something in, use it to use 100% of the capability, then come knock on my door and say, hey, we've outgrown this thing. That's a great conversation to have. And then I go find something. But this is where, you know, the myth around Shopify not being enterprise ready, I think, you know, is falling away. And because when you can operate at speed like this, turn things on, turn them off, try something else, adopt something, you know, adopt 100% of the capability of a tool and the capability, you're able to move so much faster and learn and change.
Yeah.
There's another good point, going to touch on what you said, Sean, is with the development of Shopify. That was one thing, I think, when we, you know, that example I gave on opening up the European countries the way that we did, there were certain capabilities that weren't available at that moment with Shopify, but we also took quite a good punt that the rapid speed which they were developing this platform, you could see that they were investing in it and taking enterprise seriously, which has been one of those big turning points for people. I think for a long time it was, you know, considered just a corner shop type application, but I think now it's very much moving into the enterprise space. And this is another important thing, is it changes our focus sometimes, because we've seen rapid development with Shopify now. So some of the things that people would be tempted to try to customize or to work around Shopify, we're pretty close with them and pretty close with you guys at Fuse to know when these things are coming, and also get the business to kind of rearrange some of the priorities to wait for some of these things. And we're seeing, you know, that develop quite rapidly to the point where as our business is starting to grow and we want more, some of the things that we had on our wish list that we weren't quite ready for are starting to become available. And I can see that accelerating and even pushing into the integrated POS market. So again, it's also a bit of the mindset. It's, you know, we've also got people buying into what is coming and paying attention, and we're kind of flipping some of the priorities around to adopt when these things become available.
That's probably another key takeaway to add to the list, right? When evaluating a platform, it talks about efficiencies, cost of ownership, operability, etc. But actually, the roadmap, what's coming up, because it might, as you say, might only fit 85% today, but whatever that percentage is. But it's really important to look at the roadmap, because by the time you get there, they'll probably have released it, and then you can take advantage of it. Or by the time you get it, because you need to train the team and people need to get comfortable with said system and platform, then they'll release functionality and you can take advantage of it. I think the other takeaway as well, to Sean, to your point, or one that I always talk about is, not buying a Ferrari if you've only got a learner driver. You're never going to get the most out of that platform. And I often find that people are trying to buy Ferraris and, they're only just started driving, if that makes sense, in the nicest way possible. And so, implementing a platform or selecting a platform that fits the capability within the business as well to get, that they can get the most out of, I think is really important, as opposed to having loads of functionality sitting there. It's not being used, but it cost an arm and a leg to implement, and it was really challenging as well. So I think that's
probably back to the return on investment.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love the I've always loved the implementation we did on the countries. It's like a guerrilla style tactic with the organization to yank them into place and go, actually, look, it's if we just try this out, just try it, see it, it's not going to break the business, and test and learn from it, to really kind of yank them forward. I love, for those that are daring out there, I think definitely take a leaf out of Doug's book on that one, to those side of tactics.
Yeah, I think, again, touching on that point, we were unique in that our business at the time in 2018, 2019 didn't believe the internet or e-commerce would really work for our product because of the unique shopping experience we have within the store. So it was what they thought. So we also were building capabilities of an e-commerce team, logistics, all of the jobs, all of the capabilities within e-commerce within our business from scratch. And it's a very good point in terms of growth, is that by adopting a platform and resisting people that didn't necessarily know what good looked like at that time, or were learning as we went along, also ultimately meant, as the business now has grown to the size it has, and it's doing very well for us, and it's a decent channel for us. It's allowed us to grow without really messing it up. It's like the platform almost guided us, and the capabilities kept everybody in line so that we didn't go off on track just because an individual had a particular idea. They might have had the right intention, but they might not have been in the right place at the growth of our or building of our e-com channel. So it's helped keep us true also to that motto, and it's again put us in a position now where we don't have any legacy code to worry about because we stuck to it, and now we're starting to accelerate. So it got us through that tough time.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about the mindset shift of, can we even consider a platform? We've talked about build versus adopting technologies. Now let's get into that next layer down in terms of, okay, we're a go, we're going to do this thing, we're going to move ahead, right? And some of the lessons learned and advice from this particular area. So when we're thinking about, okay, what does our overall organizational operating model look like, our organizational structure, our enterprise architecture, our kind of integration, sort of high level entities, and how we're going to move data around the platform. I'm a firm believer in this. We've done ebooks, and which you both contributed to, is fantastic, around the discovery process, and that it's an absolutely a key part of the process to make sure you go through some kind of process that will drive out what that platform's going to look like and the scope, etc. But rather than me explain, I'm going to put Sean on the spot a little bit. You've experienced it recently, particularly with us, to go through that discovery process. You're able to explain what that actually is and why perhaps it's so important.
Yeah, and I think if you think we've all been in retail for long times, and I think if I think back to when I first started with Burberry, I was trying to think what the e-com platform was. I'm pretty sure we had a 3PL warehouse, and they had some kind of e-commerce platform that sat on top of it, and we just threw them content and they sold. And then we decided to bring it in-house. But when we brought it in-house, we were bringing it into an already established brick and mortar business or retail business and an already established wholesale business. So you had your planning, merchandising, supply chain processes all baked in to retail, wholesale. So e-com became a bit of a bolt-on and quite self-sufficient. So that process of onboarding your e-com was quite separate to the other areas of the business. It's not the case now. E-com is intrinsic and part of the overall business. So it's a sales channel where now you've got operationally where you're mastering your product price, stock data in particular, has to be, that data has got to go out and serve brick and mortar, retail, e-com, mobile apps, digital concessions, marketplaces, and so on. So you're both,
sorry to interrupt, but you're both unified commerce businesses as well, because obviously Keone, right, you've got online, you've got the studio for classes, you've got the cafes, and then Doug, you've obviously got the online, and you've got the 950 stores across Europe. So just to
So now for a number of years now, since e-com has become completely integrated into the business, we think from the system of record perspective, we're always thinking, okay, where am I mastering my product price, stock data, and how do I get that out to the channels that need to consume it? And I want to optimize how I'm mastering and where I'm mastering that data. And that means when it comes to like a new e-com project or program, you have to do that discovery. You have to understand all of those business processes, where you're mastering that data, where is the right place to master that data for your specific company or your business, and go through that process of mapping the business process, building your 2B architecture, and then understanding then the integrations, who owns the data, what direction the data is flowing. Because I promise you, like if you took our example with you guys, we've just implemented Shopify. Simon and now Fuse are fully integrated into our Oracle Retail implementation for our stock management ERP. Now, we've just gone through the discovery process with you guys, and we've landed on what is right for Kyani, where we should master product, price, promotion, stock, etc. Now, if we picked up the set of systems, which Oracle and Shopify and the integration layers, and we dropped them into any of my previous companies, I promise you, we would be mastering data in different places, because it's what's right for us is not right for another company. So I think that discovery process is super important, because it's actually it's an insurance. I look at it like an insurance policy. You get that bit right, then your implementation will go smoothly. And I think another really important point, if you don't do this right, and then you start running into those bumps in the road and the curveballs, you particularly when you're taking a punt on something like Shopify as an enterprise e-com platform, you start getting yourself stuck into a place of, I've made the right technology choice. Where are my problems? Are my problems with the technology, or is it the implementation? Or actually, do you know what? Your problems were probably the fact that you didn't do your discovery up front to understand the stuff and iron the stuff out before, so that your implementation had run smoothly. Yeah. So I think it's super important. You guys have come in and you've done the process with us, and it's I feel like things are in a good place.
Yeah. It's a great explanation. I need to get you into my sales pitches going forward. You've done so well there. So and obviously part of that and that discovery, that enterprise architecture, integrations, right? It's so important as well. It's got to connect everything together. It's essentially going to enact those business processes. Doug, you've got particularly, I think, quite a complex integration set up with a million ERP systems in the background and multi-countries and all sorts. What's the most common integration mistake do you think that could potentially derail transformations, or what advice would you give to people when embarking on these complex integration architectures?
Well, as you point out, our business has grown from a very small kind of market stall approach to shops, to then rapid expansion through joint ventures, and then buying back joint ventures and doing all this very rapidly. So we've been left with a lot of countries with separate ERPs and POS systems and very few systems in the core and spreadsheet. So we've had some unique challenges within our organization. We don't just have a single ERP, maybe with a few challenges, but a single one. We've got 5, 6 different ones floating around. So for us, and the way I've looked at this, that one of the most important things to do was be able to decouple a lot of the problem systems. So whether it be ERP or old POS or a variety of poor master data, as Sean has pointed out, that might be in a variety of different places that we couldn't change instantly, is getting to the point of decoupling. So the integration approach we've taken with our integration layer has exposed a lot of that data, the best that we have of it, in the integration layer, which means we can then start to plug in things more rapidly, like Shopify. So we built connectors to AX. We've picked up a lot of capabilities to just plug into the AX system and move data back and forth, expose what we have, and it means we've been able to implement several POS systems within the environment without disrupting the back-end systems. So this has been super critical. It's allowed us to move very, very rapidly, and it's allowed us to put the money in the correct place. So instead of spending a lot of money, spending time replacing an ERP system as a starting point, we were able to progress our e-com business. We were able to put a more digital experience into the store. And we've been able to then, very recently, we've had a really rapid implementation of a few months of the Flying Tiger Club, which has been, incredibly successful and very, very rapid. So it's allowed us to insulate, and it's allowed us to present the best view we have of our data right now. And as we start replacing those systems in the background, it's enabled us to do it at a more modest pace, but it's enabled us it hasn't slowed us up on the front end. So for me, one of the most important things around this integration is laying that foundation, because that is what's going to allow us to go much more rapidly And it allows you then to deal with some of the other problems in a more timely fashion in the background. And it's definitely the case for us. You wouldn't look at our footprint of technology 4 or 5 years ago and said we were ready for anything digital. And when anybody tried to suggest it, I mean, the first website we launched, it was a test on Shopify. It wasn't even integrated to the ERP because it was so complicated. So they just kind of did some manual transactions across. So this focus on integration layer and integration and getting that foundation laid, and that's been it's been a meaty process to do that, pays off enormously in the long run. Again, touching on the whole discovery, understanding what you want to do in the future, and getting yourself set up for that growth and that rapid acceleration. And that's come through that thought process we put into that integration layer. So again, don't think everything is perfect that sits within it in terms of data. But if you look at store stock data, we're collecting stock data from 5-6 different ERP systems, 6 different POSs, franchise partners, joint venture partners. It's really interesting how we get all the data together. But what we're focusing on now is exposing our view of stock inside of that integration layer to power things like Shopify, to know what stock's in the stores and other applications. So integration, that discovery work, laying that foundation is been absolutely critical in the beginning, and a huge part of our success now in terms of moving forward rapidly.
So that's good. Thanks for that. And as you've gone through that, you kind of alluded to just how complex is such Flying Tiger and how large Flying Tiger is as a business. And as a CTO, you're in the middle of all of that. You're at the center of the eye of the storm as such, which I've been, from my past experience of being a CTO, can be quite a lonely place because all eyes are on you, expectations are high, and there's a difference between expectations and reality. How do you go about managing all those competing expectations and demands from you? Because you're getting it from every aspect of the business. How do you go about managing all of that? You can't deliver everything. So what's your secret to that?
First, I think fortunately, our company is very good at managing priorities. So we have a strategic vision. We know where we're going. We know what our priorities are. So at a very senior level, it's agreed what we're focusing on, and that then lays the foundation for how budget's going to be allocated to a variety of areas. So most of that's already being determined before I have to work with anybody to decide what's more important than the next thing. So we normally have a very clear vision of what we want to do. The second is within each of the areas, when we're looking at things that are very specific to it, we've worked very hard to set up a framework around prioritization, discovery, and delivery that's been very successful, so that each of the business areas has a good input on their particular area and works with us very closely to decide what is the most appropriate thing to do. There are things, again, that cut across. The early days of when I talked about the integration layer and some of the things that we were doing, people couldn't understand. Nobody could understand my slide and what it meant when I tried to describe the enterprise architecture. So some of that has been was investing quite a bit of time with the senior leadership team to explain why that would set us up for success and why we needed to put money into this, what I call plumbing, that nobody could see and wouldn't surface its value for a while. The other thing that's really important is knowing the capabilities of the business, because a lot of people want a lot of things, but I've got a pretty good understanding of the capabilities of the business, how much change they can absorb either at a company level, because a lot of these things touch multiple areas. So you have to understand the ability of the business to be able to absorb change. And that allows me to articulate and push back against certain priorities. Understanding also very much what we've been talking about here is our own internal capabilities, which is understanding the architecture of the system, what is possible now, what we need to wait for a little bit. So if you can articulate that, you can help drive priorities. If the chief executive wants something desperately, but you can articulate how the business is not ready for the change and the architecture isn't quite in place, and make it a sensible argument, that also really helps create a good, solid conversation. And the other thing that's been very important is our delivery capabilities. We have a very good, capable team in terms of doing the discovery and delivering, and we have a track record. that's very strong. So when you start balancing all of these things, which is understanding the capabilities of the business, having a good foundation, knowing, you know, what we've got and what we've got in the pipeline, and a good track record of delivery, when you do have discussions about competing priorities, these are all things that come into play, and you can have very sensible conversations about why things are possible, not possible. If something's desperate that we have to have it, what are the compromises? So a lot of that is really, it's avoided the sense that you're picking somebody for some arbitrary reason in terms of a priority. It's enabled us to have sensible conversations in the business to say, okay, we understand why we can or can't do something. We need to park that for a period of time until this capability is ready. Great example was our club. It was, you know, we've wanting to do it for a while, but we needed a little bit more capability in the core, in this integration layer. We did some tests in Spain with a quick solution, and it proved that people would adapt. But I chose the right time. It had been pressed that we wanted a robust enterprise solution, but we hit that point where I thought the business was ready, our technology was ready, and we were ready to go. And we launched the app in, I think, 3 months, and now we're in 6 countries. We just went live with Ireland today. So it's, again, just adding up all of these things about, you know, knowing the business, knowing what it can take in terms of change, knowing your capabilities, and having that track record that allows you to have that good, sensible conversation with the business to work through why you can or can't do something, or again, if you desperately want to do it, what compromises you need to make.
I think that last point Doug just makes here around the track record, just Doug, from what you've described, the complexity that you've worked through, but the fact that you've got on a cadence of fast delivery on Shopify and now your app, that's really important, because it builds trust across the business, so that it does enable you to have those conversations around what we can do quickly, what we shouldn't, if the business aren't capable. These are all really, really good points that Doug makes. But I think that the fact that you're delivering, it's the track record that makes those conversations easier as well.
Yeah, it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like I said, even people who joined our organization recently were amazed at the speed we could operate. This is going from a organization technically that was struggling to even get a website up and running, to stunning people within the business and people from the outside that have come from Lego or other Danish retailers, just shocked how fast we could go. But it does help with the future arguments when you tell the business, we can't do it for this reason, and if you let me get this ready, then that will be the right time to do it. So it's, you don't get it day one, but after you build some of this stuff up, it helps fuel it going forward, and then all of this stuff really starts coming together rapidly.
Okay, we're going to move on to our last topic, which I can't not mention, which is a LinkedIn Live. It's got CTOs on it, so we've got to mention AI. I think I've had a really interesting last year getting to grips with AI, and for me, I was putting this content together for this session. I was thinking it's very much like a relationship, starting out a new relationship where you're sort of flirting with the AI, you're impressed by its charm, then you dive into the honeymoon phase, you're amazed at everything it can do, and then soon reality hits and you argue over its kind of helpful but totally off the mark suggestions, and eventually you find a rhythm finishing each other's sentences and realize it was the one all along. And after that, you start cheating on it with other models. You get the Claude Sonnets, the Groks, the Geminis, and the DeepSeeks, and you go around in a circle. So very much like a relationship, I think. But Sean, what do you think is the most immediate AI opportunity for CTOs at the moment?
Well, I think for us, there's a really obvious one for us, which is really around the image generation, and automating that, both from an e-com shoot perspective and the demand that the performance marketing team put on our creative guys. And that's really come from a necessity for us. Our e-com team shooting our product, shooting 6 colors of a particular style, the cost of that, the speed at which they need to do it, and running with a lean team. So having a conversation with them, like, guys, why don't we have a look at Gen AI, and why don't we just shoot one color and see if we can use Gen AI to generate the others? But I don't want a cookie cutter. Let's see if we can move the model's pose as well. And I tell you, just the change in the last 3 months. I mean, forget 6 months. I mean, you put something in front of the creative team, they'll laugh at it. But just in the last 3 months, like now, our creative team are at the point where they're seeing these images. Actually, they would approve this to go online. So now it's just moving so quickly. That for us is one immediate opportunity. I think the color, the style color thing, I think has been done in ways before. I don't think that's necessarily new, but moving the model's pose so it looks unique is one. The other, I think, is data, driving deeper insights from our data, and also being, in clever ways, being able to automate some of our customer segmentation. I think that is one immediate benefit, I think, without a huge amount of difficulty that we can look at. And I think if I throw the ball out a little bit further and see if we can swim to it, I've got this personal, like 15 years in retail, I have watched a planning department walk around the halls of our business with their ring binders full of spreadsheets for 15 years, working exactly the same way. I mean, these guys, if there's one department that's ripe for disruption in retail, it's the planning department. And because they're just completely numbers driven, these guys. So, or their role completely evolves around numbers. So it's very ones and zeros. So I just think it's a bit of a longer term thing. It's probably more of a machine learning use case with AI, but I think that's one area that I'm very keen here with the team here to explore. And it's also it's a big expectation of my investors, that we are finding ways to be the retailer of the future and operate differently. And I'm always being asked, how are we adopting AI to improve processes and operational excellence? Sean, what are you doing? What's happening next? So it's a big focus for us. But I'll tell you one interesting set that just came to mind. I was at a workshop. The PIF often bring all of the portfolio CTOs and CIOs together. And one of the big four came in and did a whole day workshop for us on AI. They have 100-something thousand customers, and they did a survey across all their customers of where everybody was at with AI. And I think only 5% actually had something in production. And the 95 was somewhere in there. We're still POC. We're still, so it's taking quite a lot to find the use cases and actually take those use cases to production. So that's something I'm quite conscious of is, whatever we work on, it's something we feel like it's a problem that we can solve and, we can take to production.
So what do we think stopping them from adopting AI? What do we think is getting them over the line?
Well, as I say, and where I am at, everyone's biting my hand off because we're running lean. We've got gaps in the organization, and it's like, how do we close these gaps? And if there's ways we can do it with Gen AI, and it's super welcome. If I think back in my past, it's the legacy, isn't it? How do you break the legacy? How do you break these people who have been doing these roles for so long, and turn their world on their head, and think differently? That's one, and I think the other that's probably impacting everyone is data. To really be able to leverage, the capability of ML AI, you've got to set a really solid data foundation, and we've all been battling with that.
So you're in quite a unique position because the PIF are essentially trying to drive AI within the businesses. So you're getting that sort of real kind of top-down push approach, and everything needs to have an element of AI if possible, and really driving you and then the people within the business. But so you're in quite a unique position. I think that the challenge from what I see is also you don't know what you don't know within businesses. So the workforce, the teams are not necessarily asking the question when they're coming up with, when they're going through requirements and they're coming up with solutions. They're not saying, oh, well, how can we use AI to solve this particular problem? Because they don't know what they don't know. So they go into normal mode, which is, well, we're going to create an integration here. We're going to get a manual process here. We're going to do X there, all the usual solutions. And I think one of the challenges is educating the workforce as to what AI can do, how it can be integrated into the operations or solutions. And obviously the challenge with that is that it moves so quickly as well. It's not, I think people are very used to using tools like ChatGPT, etc. Copy, paste stuff in, and you get an answer out, and people can adapt to that. But now, how do we use agentic frameworks in order to improve processes and things? How do you think? It's a question for both of you, really. But how do we educate the workforce? How do we go around surfacing that question all the time? That's great, guys. Great solution. But have we thought about how AI might integrate into the solution, or actually be the solution rather than what you've come up with? How do we get them to ask that question?
I mean, I have a quick stab at it. It is and has been, I must admit, a little bit easier for me being in a PI company. I've brought the technology guys in. Google have run, they have a whole education process and system around, they've got the AI labs that they come and train internally, and it's, this has been a real insight for me, and for me as well, to understand what the tools are and the capabilities, and to apply your thinking differently. So bringing the providers in to the company, and then they're all open to do it. So that's how I've approached it.
I think we got the reverse problem. Anytime I sit down with anybody, they're like, "Can we use AI?" They seem to have got the bug here of I don't find any resistance to it. I don't find any people that aren't suggesting it, and even in maybe unlikely areas like supply chain, they're very keen on looking at process automation, because we do thousands and thousands of products, and buy and rebuy products and design. So there are a lot of areas of our business, and again, going back to the efficiency where we started, where we have to drive efficiencies within our business. We don't have the bodies to keep our business super tight and super efficient cost-wise. So people are really now looking at what can they do to automate processes, or what can they do to fill a gap where they wish they had 3 or 4 people. So I don't find the desire to do it being an issue, or the mindset. A lot of it is about practical. You mentioned, a lot of people, there's a lot of applications people can use by themselves and just get on with it. And we kind of encourage that. I think the bigger win from us at a kind of a CTO level is going to be driving some of the, with some of the solution providers, how can we drive process automation against some of the big areas to make our speed to market quicker and make us much more efficient. So I see it has a huge impact on areas. And as Sean had mentioned, in data, we're already using it in our allocation, our replenishment, using a lot of more machine learning, but drifting into the AI. So we are a numbers driven business. So there's a huge application on that. So we're looking at putting in Databricks right now, new data platform. And one of the things we want to point at that is some AI to get some insights. Amazing. I need to drop off now.
Yes. So I think we're just coming to the end of the session anyway. So just thanks so much. We're in the end of the session. Huge thanks, Sean, Doug, for sharing your insights and real world experiences. Genuinely appreciate it. It's clear from the shift from custom development to adopting scalable solutions is the way forward for retail tech leaders in the space. And I hope that everybody's taken something from the conversation today. If you found today's discussion valuable and you want to keep the conversation going, please connect with me on LinkedIn for more insights and updates. And don't forget to subscribe to the Fuse Fabric YouTube channel. I sound like a real YouTuber, don't I? For more content on how technology is shaping the future of retail.